Hey, oh wow, I'm so happy that there's so many of you turned out today. This is a time for building, for the building of community. Remember this day. Take a breath. Yes, through your mask. That is the breath that you breathed today, that we breathed together, when the very act of breathing is political. This is a time for community. Stop for a moment. Look at the person to your right. Look at the person to your left. Look in front and look behind. These are the people who stood with you today, who hold this moment with you, who breathe alongside you. This is community. Those who stand aside from the protests and from declaring that Black Lives Matter ask why should the killing of George Floyd have sparked such a fervent response in Britain? How are we connected? We must understand the legacy of history that continues to unite us. This is of particular fascination to me as a child of the Caribbean, living in the former mother country of my father. But why speak of colonialism and of slavery? Why not leave it in the past? There is nothing past about it. We know that the government loan that compensated slave masters for loss of human property was still being repaid by the taxpayer until 2015. That means that you and I were paying it until 2015. That means that the descendants of enslaved people were paying their enslavers for the God-given liberty for just short of 200 years. Once we accept that our past is very much present, we can begin to understand why George Floyd's call for his dead mother ruptures scars of old wounds over here across the Atlantic. We can stand here in Great Britain, the United Kingdom, and cast our regard at events in America, recognizing the links between endemic taking of Black lives and slavery. We know that America fought Britain for its independence and won. Yet despite dubbing itself the land of the free, it continued to build its newborn nation on a foundation of slavery. This is all very clear to us in Britain as we spy from across the seas. But this system of slavery was an invention imported to America, South Carolina, from the Caribbean by the British. It was in the Caribbean that the British developed the business model that required that Africans were seen as property, chattel, real estate. In fact, slave owners from Barbados and Jamaica were sent by the Crown to show how well Caribbean slavery could be used to build an entire economy on the enslavement of African people. So yes, when George Floyd calls for his mother with his last breaths, we feel her stir in response. Britain still fails to engage truthfully with accounts of empire, its colonial past, and the intrinsic racism. But Aimé Césaire spoke of the terrific boomerang effects of colonialism. It comes back home. It is not possible for systems built on slavery to contain true equality for all. The pandemic of racism that still exists is a direct legacy of colonialism and is tangled nicely with the issues of class at the heart of this country. In order for working class Britain to support the notion of divine entitlement ruling over them, they must be promised that there is at least someone below them, that none of the wealth lies in their hands, but at least they're not black or Asian or anything like that. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves, they say. They say never 3 times just so you get the point. But working class Britain needs to ask itself, why is none of the wealth in their hands? Listen, why does every white working class Brit not live like a king when these small islands were the center of the entire globe and raked in the profits of slave labor and the wealth of India, Australia, Canada, America, Africa, the Middle East, parts of Asia, the Caribbean, parts of South America? How on earth were Brits still starving and dying in workhouses, dwelling in awful slums, subjected to child labor? Where did the wealth of the globe go? Working class Britain, somebody been hiding something from you. You really need to have a word with them. In fact, it is time for payment. Debts remain unpaid and the bill has come due. And that is why we march in this country now. We are owed the money that went unpaid, the broken promises and dishonored contracts. But instead of money being paid in, money is being removed. Communities are being deprived of funding. Don't tell me about austerity. There was enough to bail out the bankers. And what we must understand is that this betrayal, this deliberate deprivation, is economic violence. It is continued violence against communities who already live with unhealed grief. Communities where wounds go unattended, where the message is that lives do not matter. 3 years since Grenfell burned and they're still waiting to be rehoused. We hear the message, but our lives do matter. This was already a unsettling time for Black and Asian people in this country. We were told that we are particularly susceptible to this deadly virus, yet still we were sent to man the so-called front line unprotected. Dying when we could not breathe. The message was clear. But we know our lives do matter. Innocent people have been facing illegal deportation and having their lives ruined. But our government only speaks out in defense of statues of dead men that enslaved their ancestors. The message is clear. But we know our lives matter. They do all of this, and the clever trick, the smart bomb in the defense, is that they make it a grievous fault to be angry. But anger can be healthy. It leads to action. I believe it is the soul trying to save itself, to not succumb to what lies beneath, the pain, the fear, the grief. It is the insistence to live, to heal, to change. Some of us have been marching for change for a long time. We took over when those who had been marching before us had to finally sit in exhaustion. And it has moved and inspired us to see so many young people, kids, shouting out at these protests. I hear the old calls in new voices. No justice, no peace. But I also hear new cries. Well, they're new to me anyway. What happens now? What happens now? What happens beyond a few establishments putting up some hashtags on Twitter or adding a few new lines to their work manuals? If you have not responded to the heinousness of the videotaped evidence before, why should we think that you will now? If human beings being lynched, abused, and murdered made no difference to you for centuries, why this now? If we watched while Martin and Malcolm and their generation were incarcerated, water cannon, tear gas, beaten and killed, why now? When you say you are going to make a change now, why on earth should these young people believe you? Listen, there will be reports now, there will be inquiries and recommendations. They will use the same words and be written in the same language as they have been following each generation of protest. Talk to your elders now. Work together. Let them tell you what's been said before and what's a damn lie. This is the only way for new work to be done, to not keep going over old ground. Build your memory through theirs. The new work comes after the same old promises. The new work is commitment. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is not won once and for all. These times have shown us in stark reality that time can move backwards. Hard-won rights can be lost. The watchfire must be tended. We cannot afford to let it go out. When the marching is over, keep lifting your voices in protest. Call them out when they must do better. Continue to support those who are speaking up. Be clear. What are you targeting? What are your demands? The power at the top is not going to come up with ways to share that power with you. There is always going to be plenty policy in place about how things are supposed to fairly run. But what happens when they fail to deliver? What is the cost to them? What is the consequence? They keep their money. They keep their funding. What happens to you when you fail at your job description? Vote, make demands of your politicians. Let's get the statues down. Our institutions can post all the hashtags they like, but change won't be real without the government finally listening. It's not about the police, it's not just about community underfunding, it's underrepresentation in culture, it's misrepresentation in media. They are all connected. Call them out. Set up your network so that you can communicate information and quickly respond when urgent action is needed. It costs the UK about £37,500 to keep a prisoner in jail for a year, not even counting the legal costs of getting them to jail. The problems that lead to incarceration are aided by the lack of funding in communities. It's illogical. Well, it is if you actually mean that you want things to be better. It is about insisting on investment into communities. Come together to learn and share what you learn. Know your Pan-African heroes, your Caribbean revolutionaries. Get to know your thinkers, writers, poets, artists. Support your media platforms. Employ black businesses. Celebrate black joy. Elevate black love. Then you can love others. Then you can make changes. Self-love is the only way to insist on your humanity. It is the very thing they need to rob you of. Do the work. Equip yourself with love. 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 Beautiful. Radical. Black love.